You're listening to the Fantasy Wildcard Podcast.
Good evening, welcome to the Fantasy Wildcard Dynasty Show. I'm your host, Kev. You can follow me on Twitter at Dynasty_Go. With me tonight, as always, a legend, my co-host Ali. You can follow on Twitter at FF Dynasty Grill. Good evening, Ali. How are you?
Good evening, Kev. Yeah, no, really good. Thank you. It's quite an exciting weekend with the combine going on right now, seeing all the measurements and people absolutely popping off about the quarterbacks yesterday and the wide receivers. And got the running backs today. So, yeah, really exciting time in the Dynasty calendar. So, yeah, really excited. So, Kev, how are you doing tonight?
Doing fantastic. Yeah, just really excited for tonight's show. I've not been watching a lot of the combine, but I've got the main parts of it in my mind ready to sort of put into action moving forward. One guy that has been going wild for the combine, so much so that he's made himself ill, is our co-host Matt, who's unfortunately not with us tonight. And I know we've got an amazing guest on tonight, and he's gutted that he's not here to be part of the show, but he'll be cheering on from the sidelines with his pom-poms, no doubt. And just speaking of our amazing guests that we've got on today, I'll introduce her right now. We've got the co-host of the Off the Bench podcast at Heavy Sports, a known offensive lineman advocate, #Fix6. Yeah. And she's also bringing the banter on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. Plenty of hilarious stories, including enemas, etc. But we're going to give a warm wildcard welcome to Madi Kroll, who you can follow on Twitter at Madi Kroll. Good afternoon, Madi. How are you today?
Listen, that was quite the introduction. I was nervous because you introduced Ali as the legend, and I was like, how am I supposed to follow that? But mine was even better. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you guys for having me on.
No, the pleasure's absolutely ours. I know we've had a couple of your friends on in the past with Stepmom Lauren and Sam Hall as well, so we just felt right to get you on as well. Join the crew, join the squad. And
did you guys just admit to homie hopping on air?
To what, sorry?
Homie hopping. Have you heard of homie hopping?
What's homie hopping?
When you kick it with each person of a friend group. So now you guys are 3 in. You're on your way.
Yes, we homie hopping.
That's what came out when Zach Wilson's big debacle was going on. It was really funny. Yeah.
We've learned something new already. It's got a great show in line then today if we're learning things, and we're only in the first couple of minutes. And like I mentioned, an amazing show today. We're going to be discussing the free agent dream landing spots as chosen by our guest Maddie. I know last year we had on her friend Sam, who correctly called Devontae Adams to the Raiders. So we're hoping there'll be a couple of correct answers tonight, and I know that we'll be looking at the show sheet. You've got some really smart selections on there. But yeah, we'll kick straight away into it. First off, we're going to talk about the people that are projected to stay, according to our guest Maddie. So first of all, who have you got?
Let's do it. You guys want me to go ahead and start?
Yeah, who's your first person you think is going to be staying? Your dream that they stay there?
All right. Sorry, guys. My sound kind of cut through for just a second. Okay, so we are going to kick it off with who everybody's been talking about this offseason already. Actually, we've been talking about it for a year now, right? Of course, we're talking about Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. We all know the crazy amount of money he's asking for. We know he wants it fully guaranteed. The question is, will he get it? What's going to happen? I don't believe that Lamar Jackson's going to be getting the contract that he's looking for. I do think that the Ravens are insane if they let him walk. So I think that we're probably going to see a franchise tag situation here. I'm not sure what will happen after that, but I believe that he's for sure getting the tag. I just think that you have to. As far as the moves in the back end go, they got rid of their offensive coordinator. They're bringing in someone new. So every move that they've made has kind of turned it into, hey, we're trying to build around you, Lamar. And it seems like the ball's in Lamar Jackson's court. The off the field drama that nobody's really talking about on Twitter is that the NFLPA is now getting involved in representing him, not really representative of him, but more so just kind of helping him with the contract negotiation since he doesn't have a manager or an agent. But I just think that any other team is going to face the same sort of contract issues that the Baltimore Ravens are seeing with him. So I think what's going to happen, he stays in Baltimore.
Yep, I think that's got to be the correct answer. I think if you are Baltimore and you let Lamar Jackson, a former MVP, out the door, then I think you're pretty crazy. Obviously, they've got to, or not to thank the Browns in giving Deshaun Watson that fully guaranteed contract. Obviously, Lamar Jackson, what he's got on his CV, is thinking, well, I have to at least get a fully guaranteed contract as big as Deshaun Watson's. And clearly the Baltimore Ravens are not keen on paying him that amount of money. Not really sure why. Perhaps they can point to the missed games that he's had in the last 3 years. He's had 11. That was a big problem last season and the season before, with various illnesses and injuries. And now he's also 3 years removed from his famous MVP season. But yeah, he's for sure looking for that big money this offseason. You can't blame him, especially when you look at the likes of Daniel Jones, who are looking for $40+ million a year. Lamar Jackson's a much better quarterback than Daniel Jones, so you can't blame him for going for the big bucks. And then you just got to think for fantasy wise, the Ravens were a bit disappointing last season. Obviously, Andrews struggled as well, which was a bit of a surprise for everyone. Rashad Bateman went down to injury, so there wasn't many people there to carry the load and help Lamar Jackson out. So hopefully that kicks back and we see Andrews and Bateman back to their best next year. Plus, I think they're going to definitely draft a wide receiver as well. We're talking about a few in the early, possibly round one. You're talking about Jordan Addison, people like that who could go to Baltimore, which would be a great addition from ours, especially if they manage to keep Lamar Jackson. So, or we've also seen the likes of Atlanta tossed about as a team that could be interested in trading for Lamar Jackson. So be really interesting to see where he lands. But if I had to put money on it, I would certainly put money on him staying in Baltimore. So I think that's the correct answer. But yeah, for fantasy, I think his value's dropped a little bit with the uncertainty and with the games that he's missed the last 3 years. So I think there's some value in picking up Lamar Jackson. I think he's dropped to quarterback 7 or 8 in value on keep trade cut. So I think it's worth trying to get Lamar Jackson, because I think once he's back to his best and Bateman's back from injury and the contract sorts itself out, he's a top 5 quarterback in this league.
Yeah, I'm fully with you both on this one. I think he does stay in Baltimore. You don't let this caliber of QB leave town, especially when you're a strong franchise already, a perennial playoff team or playoff contender. Trying to find another one, Lamar Jackson, is going to be real tough for him. So I expect him to stay. I think it's a great shout. I was on a show this week, Fantasy Nuts UK. Do check that out. We spoke about Lamar Jackson and sort of all the different implications for him. But the main one is that I want him to stay in Baltimore. I think he will stay in Baltimore. Maddie, I think you're going to be 1 for 1. So we're going to move on to your next player that you're hoping stays in town at his team. Who have you got?
Mr. Saquon Barkley. And I would like to say that if I was on the show last year, never in a million years would I have been as excited about this next guy. But last year we have to give this man his flowers. He went off, he came back and he did his thing. I believe that Saquon's also staying at the Giants. He's going to be expensive, but they have to hold on to him. He did too much for him last year. He fits beautifully within that offense. But a little bit of a side piece of information. I was at NFL Honors this year. Yeah. In Phoenix. And I actually sat next to Saquon Barkley's parents because Saquon Barkley went up and made a trade. He wanted to sit in front of his coach, Brian Daboll. They have amazing chemistry together off the field from what I witnessed. They were joking. They were laughing. He seems to have just a really good relationship with him. And I think that just gives us additional points and signs to point to him staying within New York with the Giants. I'm excited. Let's go. Everybody needs to try to have a little piece of Saquon next year, even if it's in a redraft league.
See what I mean? Now we've got an absolute amazing guest on today with that fantastic intel. The fact that she was basically with Saquon's family, and it does look likely that he will be staying with the Giants, and that's the best place for him for me. I think just the Giants overall. Give it another chance with Barkley and Daniel Jones. However it has to be done, get that done. See if you can progress even further in the playoffs this year in an NFC that will end up being wide open in the end. I think Dynasty-wise, he's still got a massive ceiling. I know Matt, who's not on tonight's show, thinks he is RB1 when he's on it, and used in the receiving game. I'm not sure if I'm there on that, but I just think where he's going in sort of Dynasty behind guys like ETN Walker, that sort of players in front of him. I personally prefer Barkley in the short term. I think he's situation proof if he does leave, but I do fully expect for him to stay in New York. How about you, Ellie?
Yeah, I think if you put the odds of him or Daniel Jones, if one of them had to stay, it's going to be Saquon Barkley for me. So I think he definitely re-signs. Daniel Jones, not too sure about that one, but yeah, Saquon came back with a bang last year. Obviously RB5, despite him being fairly quiet towards the end of the year, or it seemed it. But yeah, you're talking about a guy where the overall running back one is still in the range of outcomes for Saquon Barkley, especially on this team. He's still catching a ton of passes from Daniel Jones quarterback. So yeah, and it looks like they're gonna help out the offense by giving Daniel Jones or whoever the quarterback is some weapons finally. Someone that's not Kenny Golladay. Yeah, so it's going to be even better for Saquon Barkley next year. He's going to have a bit more room to run, I think, especially when I've watched the Giants this year. The defense just knows the offense runs through Saquon, so they were loading up the box. So yeah, I think you got to trust in Daboll, and you got to trust Barkley on this offense going forward. I think for sure he's going to stay.
Yeah, we're all in agreement that he's going to stay. So what a cracking start to show so far. Next up, we've got another running back who, yeah, again, he's projected to stay. Don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but we'll get your thoughts on this one, Maddie.
All right, so this one's going to cause a ruckus. I feel like Josh Jacobs. And the reason why I think Josh Jacobs is going to stay with the Raiders this next season is solely because we don't know what the hell is happening at quarterback. Am I allowed to say that word?
Yeah.
Okay.
Say whatever you want.
Oh, shoot. Okay, perfect. We don't know what's happening at the quarterback position, right? And essentially all this boils down to what's going to happen with Rodgers, right? Nobody wants to make a move until we figure out where Rodgers is going. Is he staying? Is he retiring? Is he going to play somewhere else? We don't know, right? So until we figure out what's happening, they're not going to let Josh Jacobs go, because if they have to bring in a quarterback who may need some help, may need some support, Josh Jacobs is the perfect safety blanket. He's the perfect go-to guy that they're going to need to be able to consistently deliver a solid offense, regardless of what's happening at the quarterback position. All Josh Jacobs is going to want is some money. So all they have to do is throw some cash in his face and he's going to be happy. He's going to get along with whoever as long as he's getting paid. That's why I think Josh Jacobs is almost a guarantee for this contract to stay with the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah, again, I think it's a great shout. I think he stays in Las Vegas. I think they want to go all in for Aaron Rodgers. I'd love to see the offense with Rodgers, with Josh Jacobs, with Devontae Adams once again. I think that would be really fun to watch. And yeah, Josh Jacobs, I know a lot of us, we were talking about him last offseason. We were writing him off rather unfairly. He came back this year and just looked like, for me, he looked like one of the best pure running backs in the NFL. And for fantasy as well, he was absolute gold. So if you had him on your team, you were really happy. I know some people traded for him cheap last offseason with the fact they weren't picking up his option. And yeah, I think Josh Jacobs is great going forward. I think you can still take a risk on him, even with his age that he's approaching, the fact that it's a bit uncertain with his contract. He's caught 50 plus passes the last 2 seasons, so that's good. Despite him never having a rushing touchdown, which is quite an unusual stat. But yeah, I'm full on board the Josh Jacobs hype this offseason. And I think he's going to stay. I think he's going to get that contract with Las Vegas. So 3 out of 3 for me.
Yeah, I mean, I teased at the start that this might be one of those where we're happy he stays or goes. But if I'm a Josh Jacobs owner, I want him to stay with the Raiders. With what he did last season was a mild shock to me that he was so productive in the pass game, that he was used as a workhorse, especially after that slow start when he wasn't being played in the Hall of Fame game. And people were saying Zamir White's going to be the next big thing, but he absolutely proved everyone wrong. He lived up to the promise that he had as a first round draft pick. Yes, he is entering his 5th season in the league. He's coming up to that 25, 26-year-old age, but I still think he's got plenty to go. He didn't have a ton of touches in college. They usually split the backfield over there in Alabama.
He didn't play the first couple of years. So, exactly. And everybody wanted to use that, especially in fantasy, everybody wanted to lay down on that, but that's the type of guy you want to go after because his body's not as beat up, especially the way they run those guys at Alabama.
Exactly. And I just want to get your thoughts, Maddie, on Josh Jacobs. If obviously your favourite landing spot for him is to stay with the Raiders, but if he did leave town, do you still think he could be an RB1, or is it purely based on sort of McDaniel's scheme, the pass game work? Would you still be comfortable taking him as a low end RB1 in, I guess, in 2023 or in your Dynasty leagues?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is you always have to look at what team they're going to fall to, right? Because that's definitely going to make a difference. I'm a big believer in anybody who plays for the Patriots. It's a little questionable whenever it comes to fantasy, just because target share is so across the board. Fantasy wise, it's kind of a bummer for us. But as far as Josh Jacobs' talents, yeah, that's going to translate anywhere. He's quarterback proof. He is so used to having to overcome adversity and be so adaptable the way he grew up. He is the perfect guy to bank on no matter where he's at or where he's going.
Yeah, he's definitely won us over on the Fantasy Wildcard Dynasty show. We were pretty low on him, but he has won us over. So we're definitely going to give him another chance in 2023.
I mean, he's definitely also the guy who posted on his Instagram story that said "F your fantasy team" whenever he was hurt and couldn't play. So I don't know. You do have to look past that, but outside of that, the kid wants to get his name out there and he wants to do his best.
Love that indeed. So we're now going to move on to another running back who, like Jacobs last season, had a breakout season. Slightly. A slight shock in my eyes. I don't know about you two, but who's the next person you'd like to discuss who you're expecting to stay where he currently is?
The next person I'm expecting to say is Tony Pollard. And this is funny just because I feel like there's no way in hell Jerry Jones is going to let Tony Pollard leave Dallas. That's what I'm banking this theory on. As far as a fantasy standpoint goes, Tony Pollard is actually going to be more successful for you. I feel like if he leaves and goes to another team, because the way Dallas utilizes Tony Pollard, at least in the past, was we're going to use him to get down the field, and then we're going to hand the ball to Zeke to run it in. We're going to let Zeke have the touchdown points, and Tony Pollard's going to do all the work. And that's essentially how they ran their offense last year. Will it be different now that Kellen Moore is out? I'm not sure. But I do think that Jerry Jones has made such a big to-do over Zeke that that's a very good possibility that they continue to run things this way. But I think that Tony Pollard is going to stay in Dallas, and I would just be a little careful. Obviously, the man's going to do well. He's going to be able to get the ball down the field. But unless they're bringing somebody in to completely disrupt the way they've been doing things, then I think that we're going to see the exact same thing next year. Tony Pollard's going to get the ball down the field. Somebody else is going to punch it in.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on this one, that Tony Pollard is someone that I want to stay with the Cowboys. I think he will stay with the Cowboys. There's rumours that he's going to get tagged if they can't come to a long-term deal. So Jerry Jones, we spoke about it a little bit before the show. He does like paying these offensive guys and keeping them in town. So I do think he will end up staying. We mentioned a few weeks back on the metrics show that Tony Pollard's metrics were outstanding. I think this time of the offseason, you don't typically want to buy running backs, but I think he's situation proof, although I do want him to stay in Dallas. I think that's an offense that's still got plenty to give. It's not got a wide receiver two of note, potential losing a tight end in Dalton Schultz as well. So I think even with Pollard and Zeke, I still like Pollard hell of a lot to potentially have another running back one season. On the screen, it does say Tony Pollard Giants. That is my fault. We are saying that he's staying with the Cowboys. Just have to point that out to anybody that's watching on Twitter, YouTube, etc. We do want him to stay with the Cowboys, despite me not liking him as much from a real life point of view. How about you, Ali? What's your thoughts on Pollard with the Cowboys?
Yeah, I think Matt just had a heart attack being the Giants fan. Seeing Tony Pollard's going to the Giants, it must mean that Saquon's being shipped out of town. But yeah, I mean, it just from the naked eye, just looking at the Pollard play and looking at Zeke play last year, it was just hilarious seeing Zeke plod along, but still get them high value touches. And Pollard just looked amazing catching the ball, running the ball. I think he can do it all. We've just been willing him for us the last 2 or 3 years just to be given a full workload, and whenever he has had it, he's just looked amazing for fantasy and for real life. So yeah, I think they'll be silly. They're already lacking playmakers, so I don't see them losing Tony Pollard this offseason. I think he will get the tag. I think it's an offense to buy into as well, because I still rate Dak Prescott as a passer. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb took a big step last year. And then with Pollard as well, and them especially going to add some weapons who we may talk about later on. Who knows? But Tony Pollard, we're all in on Tony Pollard.
Indeed, we are. And a quick question from Maddie on Tony Pollard. Thinking about his backfield teammate, Zeke Elliott. If Zeke was to stay, or basically, would you prefer Zeke to stay or go if you're a Pollard owner? Do you think that it's better to have Zeke, who's declining as he goes on into his career? Or would you, as a Pollard owner, prefer somebody to come in that's maybe not going to take the goal line work that Zeke does?
Am I answering this as Tony Pollard or as a fantasy owner of Tony Pollard?
As a fantasy owner of Tony Pollard.
Okay, because I was like, I have two different answers there. So as a fantasy owner of Tony Pollard, absolutely, because I think that Tony Pollard would have gotten a lot more touchdown looks if Zeke wasn't involved, especially because when Zeke was out, that's exactly what we saw. Tony Pollard had more opportunity to get into the end zone. Like I said, with a new OC coming in, maybe that changes, but absolutely, I think that Zeke, especially towards the end of the season, stopped even throwing out the blocks that he was throwing out to help that offense. And so I think that you get somebody young and hungry who hasn't been paid, who hasn't had the injuries, comes in, it's going to make a world of difference because it takes the pressure off Tony, but then it also allows him to be a little bit more diverse and gives a few more scoring opportunities, which every fantasy owner wants their guy in the end zone. Let's be honest.
Yeah, we do want that for Tony Pollard, a breakout season this year, and again, we think he can do that again moving forward into next year. So we're now going to move on to the last player that you're expecting to stay in his current team in free agency. Matt's going to be gutted, obviously, because this is another former Giant, but who's your last guy you wanting to stick around?
Talking about Evan Ingram with the Jags. I think that everybody thinks that franchise tag is coming. I expect it as well. I think that they're trying to work out a long-term deal, but of course we know that the Jags have been through it the past couple of years. Last year we saw them finally have a breath of fresh air. Trevor was able to come out, actually have a real coach who was able to help develop him. And what we saw was in turn that rookie quarterback safety net, which was that tight end combo. But I think that Evan Ingram this next year is really going to explode. I think that they are going to utilize him a lot just because that chemistry is now there. And I think that you're crazy if you overlook Evan Ingram.
Yeah, certainly he had that. Well, he had his rookie season. He was amazing. Matt absolutely loved him. I think this is the real reason that Matt's not on the show tonight, because he fell out of love with Evan Ingram. And he hated seeing him play so well on the Jags last year. But yeah, Evan Ingram did absolutely smash it last year. But you dig into the stats, he was actually rather patchy. He was up and down, almost a bit like his career. He was either having an amazing game or he was having a really weak game where he just disappeared. And for fantasy, that wasn't great. But certainly in the high points, he scored some massive points in a few games. Looking at his stats, 17.1% target share, which is 14th amongst tight ends. So not amazing, but the fact that this is a high volume offense with Trevor Lawrence taking a huge step last year was, you want him to stay in this offense. For me, I want him to stay in this offense. We're also expecting the franchise tag about $11 million. I think he played on $10 million this season. So I think they can afford it. I think it's something that they're going to look to do and just really help Trevor Lawrence take another step next year. We know that they're getting Calvin Ridley, which is going to be a great outside weapon. Christian Kirk, that move for Christian Kirk has worked out well. Zay Jones really came on the back half of last year. And obviously Travis Etienne as well. He's one of the best running backs in the NFL, looked great in parts last season. So there is competition for Evan Ingram for fantasy, but I just think we've seen how high his highs are last year. They can be weak winners. So you want Evan Ingram, the likes of him on your fantasy team. And I think there's also room for him to improve further this season. I think he can be a bit more consistent while still having them highs. I want him on my fantasy teams.
Yeah, Evan Ingram is such a tease, isn't he? Like that week 14 breakout where he absolutely smashed it. No doubt it was on a lot of people's benches because, like you mentioned, there are lots of up and down performances throughout the season. So, yeah, that could potentially be sticking in people's minds that they got burnt by Ingram by having him on the bench in sort of the week to get you into the playoffs or secure your top seeds. So yeah, he's a very interesting guy. When his highs, when he's on it, his highs are extremely high. I think it's a great offense to be in. We've seen that ETN wasn't used much in the past game as expected, so maybe it's not as terrible as we think that he's going to lose work to Riddler. There's still going to be plenty to go around. He's such an interesting guy because I think he's treated like a tight end too. He has tight end 1 week, so I don't think you can be comfortable starting him every week, but he's one of those guys that if he is a bye week fill-in, if you've got a short-term injury, he's absolutely fantastic. I don't think he can ever get back to being a tight end 1 in fantasy consistently in your stats or on a seasonal basis.
Especially when you have Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, it gets a little bit difficult, but those guys are going early round 2. So you kind of have to think about other tight ends. That's not a really deep depth roster type of thing.
Exactly. So he finished as a mid tight end 1 last season, but I just think it didn't feel like that just with the patchiness as such. I think in sort of a game type like Dynasty Best Ball, where you're not factoring in when to start and sit him, he becomes even more appealing. So I guess if you roster Evan Ingram, I'll ask you, Maddie, can you feel comfortable playing him every week, or is it best to have a couple of these guys and try and guess when he's going to go off?
I think where Evan Ingram is going to be your guy for sure is during DFS time whenever you're trying to pick rosters, right? If you need a tight end whenever you're playing, Dynasty or redraft, that's something that you definitely have to play your cards right and figure out like, how much is this going to cost me, that type of thing. But when it comes to DFS, he's always cheap and he's always going to give you something on the board as opposed to some of the other guys that you're going to have to spend too much on and really try to figure out if they're going to get the ball or not, because this kid's going to get looks. He's going to get more looks this next year. And he's going to probably be cheap.
Yeah, he was really cheap in DFS. I dabbled a little bit last season and less than 4,000 on DraftKings consistently. Yeah. So really, really good value, especially if hitting him on those monster weeks. So we're now going to move on to the players that Maddie's wanting to move town, leave home, get a new opportunity to really maximize their potential. So who's the first person, Maddie, that you want to see leave their current team and move in free agency?
A fresh start. The first one I'm going with is Derek Carr. Everybody wants to know where's Derek Carr going, which is crazy because last year we were all talking about, can Derek Carr play? Is he actually a QB1? Blah, blah, blah. But here we are talking about where's he going to go. I think Derek Carr ends up with the New York Jets. I think this because I think the Jets either want Aaron Rodgers or they want Derek Carr. And I think what's going to happen is Aaron Rodgers is going to do his BS and he's probably going to end up in Vegas, right? Because Aaron Rodgers can't command a locker room. He just can't. He knows that. He knows it's a weakness of his. He knows that he's not a people-pleasing guy, but he already has rapport with a couple of the guys there in Vegas. So I think Vegas makes sense. They're going to want to pay him. He is close to California where he was born, raised, all the good stuff. He loves that. He's going to be able to be weird in Vegas and nobody will care, which leaves us with Derek Carr to the Jets, right? The Jets, all they need is a game managing quarterback. That's all they need. He's going to be cheaper than what Rodgers was going to do, and they just need a guy that's going to be able to come in, run what they want to run, that isn't going to mess it up. And then they'll have Mike in the background. But I think Derek Carr is going to go crazy in this offense in the sense of I think that they are going to design things to where it's almost foolproof. So you're not going to get as many of the mistakes, turnovers, and it's going to be I believe the type of offense that they're going to run with Derek Carr is we're going to try to keep the ball for as long as possible, almost like what we saw the Eagles do the first half of the Super Bowl. Just try to not give the ball into the opposite team's hands until we have to. And then that defense is going to get them the ball back quickly. So I think Derek Carr is a sneaky good pick. I think that he's going to be with the Jets, and I think that's where all signs are pointing. Not to mention that they did make the move to hire Todd Downing, who has a good relationship with Derek Carr. We saw them kind of make that connection in Oakland. And then they've maintain that relationship throughout the years where they've been separated. So I think that this is where he will land.
Yeah, I absolutely love it when dots are connected, especially like former coaching ties, etc. So that makes real sense. And I think it's a great shout, the fact that Rodgers tying his dots up first, like you mentioned earlier, once he gets sorted, that's going to be the first domino. And I can totally see Rodgers going to the Raiders and then Carr coming to the Jets as a consolation prize. But from a real life point of view, he's not a consolation prize. I think he's just what they need, like you said. It'd be cruel to compare him to a Jimmy G and a Robert Saleh type team, but that's probably all he's going to have to do with Brees Hall coming back, with Garrett Wilson. Maybe with a new QB, Elijah Moore can finally live up to that potential that he showed as well. So, yeah, I've not really thought about the Jets, if I'm honest. I know there's been a lot of rumblings about the Saints, and I think that is appealing in terms of playing indoors, having Chris Olave, etc. But the Jets have got Garrett Wilson, like I said. They're primed to sort of be in control and really make a push to the team. So, from that sense, Carr would be an amazing fit for the Jets. What do you reckon, Ellie?
You do love yourself a dot-to-dot, Kev, don't you?
I do, yeah. I'm very easily entertained.
But yeah, I love the mention of Elijah Moore as well. Don't tease me. Don't bring me back in on Elijah Moore. But yeah, Derek Carr. I mean, this Jets team was sneaky good last year. They hung about in the playoff race for quite a long time, and that was with really dire quarterback situation. I mean, look how good Mike White looked. Even people were even starting him ahead of like decent players like Kirk Cousins in fantasy some weeks, because he just was looking good in that offense. So if you can picture Derek Carr, who is an above average quarterback who can sling it with weapons in this offense with a really nasty defense with Sauce Gardner and that, I think it's a match made in heaven. So yeah, sign me up for Derek Carr for a few years in New York. I think it'll be really fun.
Indeed, it will. Another one that's
It would be fun.
It would, yeah. And then this next one, it's not a guy that I think really gets pulses going, but when I saw the player to team prediction or dream landing spot, it really got me excited about this guy. So who's your next one, Maddie?
So my next guy is Jacoby Myers, and I think that he will end up with the Texans. This honestly just comes down to the business side of things and little rumblings that I've heard throughout networking around this offseason. I think that he just kind of wants to get paid, and he wants to get out of the kind of slump that we've seen. Remember how I talked about with I know I'm going to have Pats fans coming after me. Not in a sense of like slump as in the Patriots stunk last year. I'm not trying to say that. That's not my words. My words are, and when it comes to fantasy, you don't get to see that much production. Well, it's the same thing with these specialty guys. Wide receivers are like the guys who just need all the attention all the time. They want to be the showboaty guys. They want their names up there. They want it all, right? So that includes the paydays. I think that with the amount of money he's looking to make, it makes sense for him to go to the Texans. It really makes sense for the Texans because they're going to probably have a rookie quarterback coming in, right? They want to be able to have tools to build around to be able to help that quarterback succeed. He's going to be considered a veteran wide receiver. He's also going to be considered a guy who knows how to play as a team member, and he's going to be looking to kind of hold a leadership role. So I think that it makes sense for him to be at the Texans, and we'll see.
I love it. Let's get him out of New England, because I have a master in fantasy where I don't touch Patriots running backs because they drive me absolutely mad and never know what to do with them. So you're right, in fantasy, get them out of here. And yeah, I think this is not a sexy move. I think Jacoby Myers has never been a sexy player who can put up massive winning weeks in fantasy, but I do really like the guy. He's 26 years old, so he's still in his prime. I think he's incredibly underrated, and I think in the right offense, if you give him one of these really good rookie quarterbacks like a Bryce Young, then I think he can be really good. He can be the wide receiver one, and vault himself up in terms of dynasty value. I mean, he's wide receiver 45 right now and keep trade cut. I think he's just a boring wide receiver that you want on your team, but he's just never going to win your weeks. I think he's going to get a fairly decent payday this offseason because I think he's the best wide receiver in free agency. I like
100%.
him. I like him more than TikTok boy Juju. Kev might disagree on that one.
No, what fool he is.
I think people are cheering for you right now. Like, you might as well repeat that because the people are going to go crazy.
I love it. Kev was banging the drum for Juju last off season, but I think he's learned his mistake this season. But yeah, I think Jacoby's going to get a decent whack, a bit like Christian Kirk. We were quite surprised at how much money he got last off season. I think Jacoby Myers is going to attract the same sort of value. I think it's just going to be a move that works out. I think he's going to be the wide receiver 1 there. And yeah, he's just a model professional, so they're going to want him to help out the rookie quarterback.
I mean, there's so much to get through there on Jacoby Myers. First thing, I'm a boring guy. I love boring guys. Jacoby Myers, he's not boring to me. He's a lot to me. I think the fact that he's an undrafted free agent wide receiver, that's the first thing that's got me thinking there is he's definitely going to move in my eyes to get a payday because he's not earned a lot of money in his career. But secondly, I think when you're an undrafted free agent, you've got a bit of a chip on your shoulder that you want to stand out, you want to prove that you're worth, you want to prove the other franchises they were wrong to not draft you at all. So I think he can come in, and I think Houston's a perfect spot for him with a guy like Cooks that's potentially going to be traded either off-season or early on into next season. You're going to have a rookie QB that needs support, and Nico Collins is more of a wide receiver 3 type, if anything. So I think if he went to the Texans, it's going to be fantastic for his dynasty value, his output. Juju's dead to me after coming after the Eagles, boys. So I'm firmly in the camp and agreeing with you two that Jacoby Myers is the best free agent wide receiver out there. He's done really well in New England in a terrible offense for wide receivers. I mean, outside of a few slot wide receivers and Randy Moss, one of the greatest ever, what have wide receivers done there over the last 25 years with the GOAT at QB? Not Mac Jones, Tom Brady. So yeah, Jacoby Myers to Texans would be outrageous. I saw Maddie limbering up as well. She's giving it a few stretches when we was talking about Myers as well. So yeah, definitely got us excited. And we're now going to move on to the next wide receiver who we mentioned Matt again here as a Giants fan. He definitely got him excited back in the day. Who's your next wide receiver, Maddie?
He's going to hate me then. I threw this one in just because it's funny and I kind of wanted to talk about it. I have OBJ going to the Cowboys only because the only place in the world that it would make sense for OBJ to be right now is the Cowboys. He's still rehabbing. We still haven't seen him back at 100%. Who's going to take the chance on him and pay him all this money when they're not sure how well he's going to do? It's going to be Jerry Jones, right? And I was at Senior Bowl when all the ruckus happened where Jerry Jones was like, yeah, we're open to talking about him again, which means that Jerry Jones is like, oh, people have stopped talking about me. I need to bring up this OBJ thing again. Here we go. Also, they're going to have to do some stuff to build around Dak, right? They're running out of options. So you got rid of Kellen Moore. Obviously, they're gun-ho on Mike McCarthy and all of his game management mistakes. So now it's on Dak Prescott, right? What is Dak Prescott going to do this next year? How can we build around him? I think by giving him a flashy wide receiver, what's going to happen is either A, it works out great and they're able to diverse their offense tenfold because they haven't really had a true wide receiver 1, or B, they're going to have a flashy guy that's going to be your fallback guy if things don't go well. So I just think that OBJ makes sense in this offense with the changes that they've made that will be going forward.
Yeah, he's got to come back to the NFC East, hasn't it? That would be just hilarious to play against the Giants, to spice up the rivalry between the Cowboys and the Eagles as well. I think when he's been on it, like when he played in the Super Bowl for the Rams, he was awesome. He was the best player on the field till he got that unfortunate injury. And you make great points. The Cowboys are in a Super Bowl window. I think even though sort of the Eagles coasted to the Super Bowl, the Cowboys were pretty close. They had dropped a few clangers in season, but yeah, they put a pretty good fight with Cooper Rush at QB for several weeks. I I think getting somebody like OBJ is going to firmly put them back into contention, serious contention, with potential guys like Dalton Schultz leaving. With Michael Gallup still having to prove he's fully back from his injury as well and his long-term deal. So I would love him on the Cowboys just from a real-life dramatic standpoint, and I can totally see it happening with Jerry Jones, like I said, Maddie. So great shout on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to happen, right? It's a match made in heaven. OBJ loves the spotlight. The Dallas Cowboys are always in the spotlight. So let's just pair them up. It seems to make too much sense. I mean, I think Jerry Jones has even met with OBJ's mum, so it's going to happen, right? And I mean, the last time we saw Odell Beckham on the pitch was Super Bowl 56. He actually looked really decent before he had that bad injury. So the last time we saw him, he was fine. What is he, 29 years old? I think he's still got a role to play on a team. He obviously wants to go to a playoff contender. He teased coming back in the season all for the playoffs, but it didn't happen. In terms of fantasy-wise, is he still relevant? Perhaps he could be a nice cheap addition for a competing roster. Otherwise, I think he is still a sell. I think his name alone holds some value. So if he does get a move to Dallas and everyone thinks he's going to be the wide receiver 2 there, then I think he's going to have a bit of a value spike. So it's time to sell him. But yeah, it's going to be fun as hell if he does move to the Cowboys.
Let's make it happen, eh? And if he does move to the Cowboys, it's going to be bad news for this next guy, the final person that Maddie wants to see leave town. Who have you got?
I think that we are going to see an exit from Dalton Schultz. And I went back and forth on this one for a while. This is a guy that I've had my eye on what's going to happen in free agency, just because the Cowboys, they did the whole tag thing, and they basically... There goes my mic. They basically made it sound... That was probably a loud noise. I apologize, guys.
It's a good catch.
Thank you. I've got good hands. At me, Odell. But I think that they've obviously proven that they want to be loyal to Schultz. However, I just don't know how they make it work financially. So I have him leaving. I want to see him with the Colts only because of... We have a new head coach, and I think that with Shane's history of utilizing tight ends as blocking tight ends, and he has them very involved in his offenses. It's what we've seen consistently, and it almost goes back to that safety blanket thing, right? He's big, he's aggressive, he's physical, and that's exactly what this coach has been known to love in the past. That's what we saw him do in Philly. I expect that to kind of carry over into Indy, and I think this would be a perfect piece to bring in, especially when, we're probably talking about not an elite quarterback, right? We know that Schultz will be quarterback proof. We know that he'll be adaptable. He'll be able to come in and bring that physicality to this offense. I want to go ahead and prep this because I don't like Schultz for fantasy next year at all. Like, no matter what aspect you're looking at, especially if he leaves. If he stays in Dallas, okay, maybe, but he's going to be at the bottom of my list. If he goes to the Colts, same thing. I think that, like I said, he'll be utilized more for his physicality. I think that we're going to see a lot of blocking. I do think that he'll have some receptions and maybe be like a cop-out guy, but I don't think that he's going to be bringing a ton of fantasy production.
Yeah, I think I'm right with you. I mean, it was quite a fall from grace this season. Dalton Schultz was a massive disappointment, one of the biggest fantasy losers. I mean, it wasn't bad. It was just trying to follow up that tight end 3 finish he had in 2021 was always going to be difficult, but he just seemed to be phased out and just not used as much as he was last season. So yeah, I mean, Kev, you made a great call on him. You were banging the drum for him for the last couple of years. Looked an absolute fantasy god at the time, calling it. And I hope you sold high. Hope you sold high because yeah, his value has dropped massively. And with them looking like they're going to use the tag on Pollard, as you mentioned, Maddie, is there going to be much money left over? Are they going to really prioritize Dalton Schultz on this offense? Probably not. So I think he will move. And I think the Colts is a great shout for a landing spot, which it would get me nervous for Dalton Schultz. I only really like him in this offense, as you mentioned. So if it was me and I had Dalton Schultz, I would probably look to trade him away this offseason. And someone that we mentioned on the show a couple of weeks ago, Chig Okonkwo is our guy going forward. I'd trade Schultz away for Chig right now, and you probably get a little bit on top.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, this one hurts on Schultz. I've been trying to get rid of him for ages, to be honest, because I had a lot of him, and I've not been getting much bites, to be honest. This was when he had start of the season when he had the Cowboys and before the injuries, etc. So yeah, his market's pretty dour in Dynasty leagues at the moment. I think you're right what you say. Wherever he goes, it's going to be a real struggle for him to be a tight end one again. I think the Colts is an interesting one with Shane Steichen. The fact that they've swung and missed on a few tight ends on that roster, Mo Cox, Kyle and Granson, maybe Jelani Woods is the man, but now there's a new offensive scheme in place. It's kind of tough to say with certainty that, Jelani Woods is going to make that step in year two. So, yeah, there's not many places you'd be happy with Schultz going from Dallas to somewhere else and performing potentially as a tight end one, but I think the Colts is one of the better places. I've got a bit of nostalgia for sort of the slower white tight ends of the Colts, like your Jack Doyles. Maybe it's a bit harsh on Dallas Clark. He was maybe faster than slow, but just gives me that nostalgia. So we need to get them slow white tight ends back in Indy, no doubt.
Yeah, he really shot himself in the foot by showing that he could block, because like that's when you're talking about the fallout, like that's what happened is we watch Kellen Moore say like, oh, you can block. Okay, well, we're going to utilize that, and we're going to help the rest of the guys and make our quarterback feel a little bit more comfortable. So I think that's where his downfall was. That's why you will probably never see Mark Andrews throw out a decent block in his life.
That's absolutely right. And that brings us to the end of the free agent dream landing spot section. And we're now going to come on to the main event, the Fantasy Wildcard selection, where we get our guest Madi to pick her Fantasy Wildcard, the player that will improve their dynasty value the most in 2023. So, Madi, who have you got as your Fantasy Wildcard selection?
No pressure here, right? People are going to think that I'm crazy, and this is why I chose this guy. I like to, when I'm asked questions like these, I like to find guys that I feel like are going to overproduce for what you're going to have to pay for them, what you're going to have to give up for them. My guy going into 2023 for that is Drake London. And I think that, say what you want, I think that he had a decent first year for what was happening in Atlanta. I think that we saw him come into more of the timing and rhythmic moves that's going to help him build into season 2. We also saw him play with 2 separate quarterbacks, which allows us to actually make a difference. When you play with one single quarterback all the way through, not as much. When you play with 1, 2, or 3, essentially once you get to 2, we start to see, okay, are they going to be able to be productive no matter who's throwing the ball, whoever is handing off the ball, whatever. I think that Drake London is going to be cheap. I think that a lot of people have given up on him, especially towards the end of the season when we didn't see anything out of him because we couldn't. I think that a lot of people forgot about him, but I think he's going to be cheap, and I think that he's definitely going to add value to no matter what team you draft him. As far as fantasy goes, you want to play him DFS, you want to play him Dynasty or redraft, he's going to be a guy that's going to pop off and surprise you for how low that he's going to be. But yeah, I think that we're going to see his target volume increase significantly this year, and I think he's going to make the most out of it.
Yeah, I love this pick. Drake London was my wide receiver 1, my rookie wide receiver 1, coming out of the draft last year. So really glad to hear Drake London. I mean, people forget about him, I think, because of just how good Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave was last year, and everybody has them ranked in the top 10 in Dynasty, and kind of forget about Drake London because a lot of it's to do with the scheme. The run-heavy scheme from Arthur Smith is rather frustrating. The quarterback play wasn't great. But if you look at the stats, Drake London was really good at the start of the season. He came out of the traps incredibly fast, had some sensational games, and then sort of faded away a little bit with the quarterback play with that scheme. But then came back really with a bang the last sort of 5 games of the season. He had 48 targets, which is up there with the elite level. So yeah, Drake London, I think, is someone that can take another step next year. I'm certainly hoping for it because I've got an absolute ton of him. He's wide receiver 13 on keep trade cut, so I think there's certainly scope for that to improve. And so in Dynasty this offseason, I think a move that I would look to make would be to capitalize on the hype of Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and trade down for Drake London, and you can get quite a bit on top of that as well.
I agree with that.
Absolutely love this selection. I think he's been slept on a little bit. I think considering if your team's like a rebuilding team in Dynasty and you're needing some upside for next season, players to grow in value, I think Drake London and Treylon Burks are the two that stand out to me as guys that they're projected to make that big leap in year 2, which I really see happening with both of these guys. I had them superb prospects, probably better than Garrett Wilson, just based on my college model. So big fan of Drake London. He had the highest target rate out of all rookie wide receivers. His yards per route ran, which is a very strong indicator as well, was as it was higher than everyone apart from, I think, let's have a look, Chris Olave. His fantasy points per route were right up there as well. So there's lots to like about it. It's just that QB situation. I just can't see the Falcons going into next season with Ridder as the QB. I think it's got to be someone else. Rumours of Lamar probably not going to be true, but they've got to get an upgrade at QB. Someone that's not a round 3 QB is going to get it done for them. I think they're a sneaky. Sorry, Ali. I think they're a sneaky team to win the NFC South next season with the right moves. And I think Drake London's going to be a massive part of that, and it does help that Kyle Pitts on his team as well. He's not going to be getting double covered all the time. You can't do that when Pitts is on the field as well. So, yeah, wide receiver 13, like you said. Is it a shock if he's borderline top 5 or 6 and into next season and he's jumped guys like Olave and Garrett Wilson? Personally, I don't think that would be a shock to me. So I think it's a great shout. I'm willing it on as well because he is someone I'm desperately trying to buy low on in my Dynasty leagues. So
And
good shout, Manny. Well done.
Thank you.
Exactly, yeah. Right, so that brings us to the end of the show where we've discussed Maddie's free agent dream landing spots. Before you go, Maddie, please remind the audience, let them know where they can find you and anything that you'd like to plug that you're working on at the moment.
You guys can follow me at Madi Kroll on anything. I keep it consistent, right? Nobody wanted that name, so I've taken it on every single social platform there is. But yeah, follow me there. I will keep you guys updated. But I do have a new show that's launching on heavy.com's page. I have my own little section, so I will tweet that link coming out. I've been teasing it for a few months now, and it's actually coming live this upcoming week. So definitely check it out.
Excellent timing then.
I know, it's perfect.
Perfect. Just yeah, that's awesome. And any final thoughts on today's show, Ali?
No, I just want to thanks for coming on, Maddie. Thank you for your time on this Sunday afternoon. You could have been watching the combine, but you're not. You're spending an hour with us. So there's that. And also, I think Sam Holt smashed it last year, but I have a feeling you might have done one better. I think that one or two of these moves could happen, and yeah, you're going to win.
Hey, listen, it's always a group project in the fantasy world, right?
Indeed.
Love that. And just echoing what Ali said, just thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure to come on. Obviously, you've missed the combine, which is full of athletic guys. You've come on a show with 2 unathletic guys, so real contrast in what you could have won, etc. But yeah, just your knowledge has been superb. We've made some great shouts. The wildcard section was bang on as well. So thank you for sharing your knowledge, your wisdom with us today. And we'll be sure to check out your new project you've got coming up very, very soon.
Thank you, guys. It was so much fun. I should mention before you guys go, though, the new show coming out is not all about football. It has some football stuff in it, but it's more of that banter you were talking about. So I didn't want to come on here just spitting about football and people catching my show and being like, this is not football. You can catch off the bench for that football talk.
Love that. Thank you very much. So yeah, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and subscribe to our YouTube at Fantasy Wildcard. Join us every Wednesday for the podcast and the stream of the show. Thank you once again. Have a good one, and we'll see you again soon.